On the morning of October 21st, 1966, a colliery waste heap collapsed down a hillside and covered the Pantglas Junior School in the small Welsh mining village of Aberfan. It killed 28 adults and 116 children who had just started classes. This catastrophic loss of life, which was almost half of the all-enrolled children in the village, had a traumatic impact on the survivors, a high percentage of whom went on to develop post-traumatic stress disorder. Indeed, Aberfan has become a popular case study in the epidemiology of disaster and the psychology of trauma. It has also been widely cited in the literature on premonitions and prophetic dreams, which is what I'm going to talk about today. On the next day, the 22nd of October, J.C. Barker, a consultant psychiatrist working at Shelton Hospital in Shrewsbury, travelled to the village to ask whether anyone had foreknowledge that the disaster would happen. With the help of the science correspondent at the Evening Telegraph, he led a national appeal and asked people to send in their premonitions about Aberfan. 76 of these testimonies that were sent to Barker were analysed in an article he wrote for the Journal of the Society for Psychical Research in 1967. In the article, Barker noted that 36 of the 76 cases were dream premonitions, 14 of which were reported to a, quote, credible witness before the event. Several reported hearing the screams of children being engulfed in the slurry, and Barker noted that these were experiences that haunted them in the intervening year since the disaster. While Barker accepted that there was a lack of detail in many of the reports and an obvious problem in verifying whether visions had actually been experienced before the event, Barker nonetheless had seen enough evidence to convince him that Britain needed what he called a Central Premonitions Bureau that might collect and collate the dreams of ordinary people in order to detect peaks or patterns in dream reports. What he was envisaging was an early warning system that might prevent the kind of catastrophic disaster that struck Aberfan. Some people, Barker speculated, might act like human seismographs and detect future natural disasters. Now, this connection between disasters and dream premonitions was, of course, not new. Nor was it unusual for people to share their dreams regarding the future, which was a normative practice in all human societies until very recently. Examples abound here, from the Franklin expedition to the sinking of the Titanic. Ordinary people send their dreams, visions and prophecies to the press and to collectors, keen to share their foreknowledge in public forums. Dream evidence became a regular feature in newspaper reports of notorious 19th century crimes as well, such as the murder of Maria Martin and the Jack the Ripper murders. After the aviator Charles Lindbergh's baby was kidnapped and murdered in 1932, two Harvard psychologists collected 1,300 dreams from members of the public, although only 5% of the respondents accurately saw that the child was dead. Meanwhile, the work of the Society for Psychical Research in the 1880s and the mass observation movement in the 1940s gathered dreams on a large scale as part of a set of pioneering mass surveys in psychological life. So I'm going to talk today about another type of premonitions bureau, which is a collection of dreams about sudden death reported in inquests or in newspaper reports of deaths between 1800 and 1930. I think these death dreams can offer insights into the lives of people, their landscapes and their responses to loss. So far, through searches of digital newspaper content, I've collected around 300 incidents of dreams coincident with a sudden death, such as murder, suicide, accidental death, which were reported to coroners, journalists or the police. It's likely that a thorough search of actual inquest reports, such as they are, will uncover many more. As interesting as each individual death dream is, when taken together they reveal a social history of death in working class communities, a consistent feature of which seems to be the role of the industrial landscape in shaping how people suddenly died and how people dreamed about these sudden deaths. These cases involve a landscape of canals, towpaths, quarries, ponds, mills, mines and railway tracks. The dream reports, most of which are very brief statements of foreknowledge of sudden death, were the manifest content of people who still shared their dreams with each other and the authorities with little fear of embarrassment or being diagnosed. This dream sharing practice seems to have ended around 1920. Just two examples of these kind of inquest reports. In 1846, an inquest held at Darlaston in the West Midlands on the body of a 14-year-old girl named Phoebe Devi. She's described as being of an imbecile mind. The girl was missing for some weeks before a local man dreamt he saw the body of a woman removed from a disused coal pit. The man went to the pit and threw down a stone. It landed on something soft. Some foundry workers nearby lowered a lighted string down the pit, revealing the body of Devi. She was brought to the top. A jury was swiftly gathered nearby. The body was examined. After hearing the dream report, the jury returned a verdict that the deceased was found dead at the bottom of a coal pit, but how or by what means she came to be there was unknown. In 1859, in Otley, West Yorkshire, a 2-year-old boy was drowned when he fell into the mill dam near his house. The mother of the deceased had a very singular dream about 2 months prior to his birth, namely that she saw a little coffin floating on the water where her child was found. The dream was considered an evil omen and expressed a fear that her son would be drowned. This is the original quote. So these are the kind of cases that are cropping up. A huge amount of drowning cases seem to be coincident with premonition dreamings. Also hangings and a few murders. I've started to plot these on a map, and I note with envy the history pin, which is probably more sophisticated than this. So this is just a Google map, and the green icons relate to dreams of where a missing body is located. The pinky purple are mining related premonition dreams. The reds are suicides. The browns are railway track dreams. The yellows are murder. The black is accidental death that didn't take place in a railway. The blues are deaths at sea. And the lighter yellows are when people dream of their own death, tell someone close, and then die, and the person who was told tells the inquest or the policeman. So you can start to see some patterns emerging, such as a huge amount in the Black Country, Greater London and South Wales. Incidentally, a lot of the body location dreams around here are somewhat related to mines, in that the bodies are discovered in disused coal mines and the industrial landscape. The white icons, I've been cross-referencing a folk motif, which is trying to discover a body using a loaf and quicksilver, or the loaf and mercury, which is if you were looking for a drowned body usually in the canal, because it was quite a West Midland folk tradition, but it pops up everywhere. You would get a halfpenny loaf and put some mercury in it and maybe a lighted candle and send it down the canal, and it would stop where the body was. So that was another means of discovering a body, and again that stops around 1920. So there's a lot of work to be done here, and they need to be coded and details put in. So using this material, my research questions are: is there a connection between risk perception and the dream content or reporting? And why did people report these dreams, and why did they stop reporting them? Related to this would be the continuity hypothesis of dreaming, which, I'll put that up. The continuity hypothesis of dreaming would suggest that dreams are thoughts about life that happen when you are asleep or in an altered state of consciousness. The idea is that dream content comes from a person's social interactions, and we should therefore expect the reported dream content to also reflect a person's concerns. This idea of a social cycle of dreaming is useful for historians because it bypasses the psychohistorical search for repressed or latent or symbolic content, and encourages us to see dream reports as social communications that point to everyday stresses and challenges such as hunger, disease, and sudden death. I have two hypotheses regarding this collection of death dreams. One would relate to the function of dreams. Are dreams of sudden death in an industrial landscape barometers of stress? Are they giving us a signal that something is happening in these landscapes that is generating dreams in people's minds? Innumerable modern studies link negative dream content with perceived ecological risk. So studies of firefighters' dreams, studies of the dreams of serial killers, studies of people who are being, they've done a study of Israeli children who are under a risk of rocket fire in Israel, and they've shown that negative dreams seem to occur when a person is at daily risk and under stress or under threat. Dreaming of death makes sense when death is likely locally. Interestingly, in terms of the breakdown of the 300 cases, 52% of the dreamers are male, 48% female, but the victims, the bodies, 69% are adult men, 14% of the bodies are adult women, and 17% are children, which seems to suggest that there's the loss of a wage-earning man is overrepresented in the cases I've found. And again, women were underrepresented at inquests in any case. So the deeper questions here are, how does one build up an idea of actual risks? How do you start to find out what the actual risks in a community are where these dreams are happening? And how the perception of that risk is dreamed, recalled, and then reported, which are three different things. By which time the raw dream has become well and truly cooked. So in other words, were these dreams actually human seismographs, or were they formed in the telling? A second hypothesis relates to the social pragmatism in reporting or even inventing dreams and then reporting them. The sharing of dreams seems to mirror the occurrence of dreams in providing strategies to cope with stressful situations. Dream sharing in the form of a gift or a dialogue can draw us together in relational ways and forge social bonds. So dream sharing might create an anxiety buffer and increase perceived intimacy. Sharing dreams, therefore, might be socially very useful, especially for vulnerable women. How much time do I have left? Okay, I'll just briefly mention one type of sudden death, which is deaths in mines. Many examples of this, and the question is, are miners more likely to dream of dying? Are their families more likely to dream of the men dying than another worker? Again, the key thing is the actual history of risk. Mining is a very risky business. In the Victorian period, a miner is killed every 6 hours. A miner is seriously injured every 2 hours and injured badly every 2 minutes. Major disasters decimate communities. I mentioned Aberfan in the 20th century, but South Wales and the Black Country had a high mortality rate because of thick coal and poor ventilation. The town of Talc in Staffordshire, out of a total population of 5,000 people, between 1860 and 1910, 300 people died in accidents, which is an extraordinary loss of life. But the point is that compared to unskilled labourers and agricultural labourers, miners had better wages, fewer work hours, and a lower overall mortality rate, especially after 1880. So the question is, why am I picking up more agricultural deaths in inquests? Why do miners and their families report death dreams on a scale incomparable to other occupations? And I think it's to do with the perception of risk. Miners are proficient detectors of and managers of their levels of risk. They also have a rich and slightly isolated folklore. Canal workers in the Black Country, miners in South Wales, they have a huge amount of superstitions and taboos related to their work. They're keen observers of omens. They don't work on certain days. They have a whole gendered folklore about what to do if you see an old woman in the morning, or a white rabbit, or a white crow. They're bird watchers. They have stories of Tommy knockers, and there are lots of tales of haunted mines. Where people go on strike until a cunning man or a priest exercises the mine. There's an example there. So we can also look to ballads to find this theme of the premonition dream and the daddy ignoring the premonition dream from the wife or the child. and that pops up in at least 5 ballads I've found recently. So I'll close by saying, why did people report their dreams to public authorities? In modern times, empirical studies show that when we share our dreams with others, especially in times of loss, it can increase intimacy. Given most of the dreams are collected related to the death of a wage-earning man, we can speculate that the sharing of a dream at an inquest by a widow or by someone connected to the family was a way of turning a bad death into a good death. So we heard something about that earlier. And the question about why this stopped being reported or stopped being heard in the 1920s might have something to do with the professionalization of inquests from the left, more informal pub inquest to the more formal court inquest, where dreams become embarrassing, Freudian ideas spread, and what we might call a dream vernacular, a common language about dreams based on dream books, is no longer understood by a new set of authorities. So people undoubtedly continue to dream of death and still do, and we all do, but from around 1920s, the conditions that support the sharing and reporting of dreams linked to risky occupations suddenly goes. So I'll leave it there.